Second Chances. Chapter 13.
The Constitution stood in a parking orbit around Naval Base 13. David and Admiral Halloran had walked to the teleporter room and prepared to teleport to the base. David's stomach lurched, and he felt sick all over. It had to be in reaction to the upcoming Board of Inquiry. David had still not received word concerning the charges against him other than the note in Admiral Marovich's message. Stepping onto the teleporter platform, Halloran and Stevens teleported to the Naval Base teleporter room. There waiting for them was an attractive Lieutenant J.G. who introduced herself as Lieutenant Zappelli, Commodore Clausen's aide. The lieutenant then led the two officers to the Commodore's office. She stepped in and announced Admiral Halloran and Captain Stevens. The Commodore came around his desk and welcomed the Admiral. Then, turning to David, he said,
"Captain Stevens, relax. The Board of Inquiry has been cancelled. Admiral Marovich found the parties responsible for pigeonholing your reports concerning all terrorists, and they will go before a court-martial. So you have been exonerated."
Halloran asked.
Why were we not told about this? Captain Stevens has had a load on his shoulders since we got Darian's message.
I really can't answer that question, Admiral. I was still arranging for the board this morning. Then I received a call from Admiral Marovich telling me what I have told you.
The relief David felt was reflected in his bearing and on his face. He staggered a little, faint from the relief of all his fears. Admiral Halloran and Commodore Clausen reached out to help him sit. David sat a moment and then thanked his superiors. Then, addressing the Commodore, he asked, "Were there any instructions as to a mission for us?"
No. The Admiral instructed the Constitution to stand down and grant the crew shore leave for a few days.
Then, if I may, I'll inform my first officer to begin releasing the crew. Halloran asked.
Dave, should we have Jerry's medical staff look at John?
That is sticky, Admiral. If we don't, would John have done better seeing the doctors here at Naval Base? If we do, how will T-Vass feel about it? The Commodore replied.
I can solve that problem for you. I have your report. I'll send my chief surgeon over to the Constitution to evaluate your man's progress and whether we can do more than what is already being done. That way, you're off the hook.
I would appreciate that, sir. Commander Self means a lot to me and the ship. Not that Commander Slater is any slouch. She has stepped in and served brilliantly. I have to say that Admiral Halloran saw that the Constitution got the finest crew in the system Navy, bar none.
When you were here before, you had only praise for Perry's crew. Now you're saying that this bunch of troublemakers, convicts, and reprobates are the finest crew in the fleet.
I still have only praise for the crew of the Enterprise. I stand by that. But what we have on the Constitution are 420 experienced combat veterans. And now that we have the love bug aboard, this bunch of troublemakers, convicts, and reprobates are truly the finest in the system Navy. I would pit my crew against any crew, including the crew of the Enterprise. I just wish I could find a way to get the system Navy to re-examine the courts-martial records of these people.
Admiral, Captain, if there is nothing else I can do for you, I have an appointment in about 10 minutes. So please excuse me and make my naval base your home.
Both officers replied, "Thanks. We will." The Commodore left Halloran and David to find their way around the base. David tapped his comm badge. "Number 1, this is the captain.
Slater here, sir.
Set a roster for shore leave commencing at once. We are to stand down for a few days."
What about your board, sir?
The board has been cancelled. David heard Commander Slater say congratulations. But in the background, he heard a cheer from the bridge crew.
Sir, may I inform the ship?
"Yes, Commander, you most certainly may." Captain out. Commander John Self was transferred to the medical wing of the naval base to complete his recovery. David and Admiral Halloran strode to the medical wing to check on him. T-Vass was just leaving the ward when the two officers arrived.
Are you looking for Commander Self?
Yes, we are, Doctor. Where can we find him?
I'll take you there. Just follow me.
The three walked to the far side of the wing and entered room 13. There sat John looking quite unhappy.
"Captain, Admiral, why transfer me here? There's nothing here our ship doesn't have."
"John, relax. We just wanted the naval base medical people to check you out. This is no reflection on the ship, you, or Dr. T-Vass. I only want what's best for my first officer."
"I understand that, Beverly. Commander Slater is doing a top job.
You're absolutely right, she is. You didn't expect less of her, did you?
No, I guess not. It's just that I hate the idea that I'm replaceable.
John, everybody is replaceable. I want you back. But in top shape.
Well, thanks, boss. Doctor, how long will I have to stay here? I would much rather be on the ship.
Commander, we will take you back to the ship tomorrow morning. However, I want these people to perform just a few more tests first. Will that be acceptable, John?
Admiral Halloran spoke.
John, I am hoping for a surprise for you in a few weeks. But first, I just need to hear from Darien.
John regarded the 3 officers around his bed and started to say something when suddenly there was a group of loud voices insisting that they had to see Commander Self. Through the wing came 5 crewmen from the Constitution. In the lead was Beverly Slater. The group came to a stop and excused themselves. Slater explained.
Commander Sorrell has the con captain. We're taking advantage of your order for shore leave. And we decided to see how John, that is Commander Self, is.
Captain O'Reilly, Lieutenant Carson, Lieutenant Larry Sorensen, and crewman Shirley Wilson O'Reilly were with Slater. That's great, replied David, we were just leaving. Have fun. With that, the 3 officers turned and started out. David heard Beverly say,
Oh, John.
He looked back, and Beverly was very gently embracing John, and he was returning the show of affection. David smiled. I think we might have another wedding,
She has spent many hours with Commander Self after duty.
replied T. Vass.
I do believe you are correct in your assessment of their relationship. The others have visited him as often as you have, Captain.
Well, after the rocky beginning, I'm so glad to see these people finally becoming a crew. The 3 left the medical wing and went to the base equivalent to the Enterprise's lounge, called the Spa. The 3 ordered a cup of coffee and sat quietly. Admiral, can you tell me about the surprise you have for John?
This goes no further. I have talked to Darien about recommissioning the other old heavy cruisers. The real problem is the lack of qualified personnel. So, I suggested that the records of your officers be reviewed. You may lose your first officer to command another of the old heavy cruisers.
Do you know something else, Admiral? My officers are pretty much persona non grata with the system Navy.
You may have noticed when you went through the records of your crew 2 individuals were responsible for the charges brought against most of your crew.
Yes, sir. I noticed Admiral Lom and Admiral Chavez were the most prevalent names in their courts-martial.
It was discovered that these 2 were also responsible for blocking many promotions, making punitive transfers, and even sidetracking your reports concerning Alteris. Accordingly, Admiral Maravich has asked them to retire for the good of the service. And he has ordered that the court-martial record of every individual those 2 brought up on charges be reviewed. Darien is on a rampage. Needless to say, a whole group of officers is scared to death. Nevertheless, the system Navy may turn out to be a decent service very soon.
T. Vass asked.
Admiral, do you think the court-martial sentences will be reversed?
I don't know. Some, perhaps. I believe that there will be justice in some cases, but some were guilty of the charges, even though they were placed in a situation with no option. You were a Commodore, weren't you?
Yes, I was. So was Commander Sorrell.
Darien will have every case investigated thoroughly. I'm sure that some will be exonerated. But it will take time. Be patient.
Halloran stood and announced that he was returning to the ship and getting some rest. T. Vass and David ordered a second cup of coffee and continued to talk for several hours. It was well into the 3rd shift when the 2 officers returned to the ship and retired for the night. 6 days later and David was called to Commodore Clausen's office.
David, I've got your mission orders.
Great, the crew is getting restless. They need the challenge of a mission. So what is it, sir?
Well, here, read them for yourself.
We will proceed to the Alteris sector and begin the mapping mission. Says here to coordinate with Commodore Mendez when we arrive in the sector and keep him informed of anything we might find. Commodore, we will leave at 0800 hours in the morning. Thank you for your hospitality. The 2 officers shook hands, and David departed for the ship. Tapping his comm badge, Captain to Constitution.
Constitution, sir. Lieutenant Abels.
Abels, please give me Commander Slater.
Slater here, sir.
Beverly, we have mission orders. We will depart at 0800 tomorrow, back to the Alteris sector. Alert the crew, please. Captain out.
Aye, sir. Out.
Arriving in the teleporter room, David went immediately to sickbay to see John. John, we've got mission orders.
I know. I heard Beverly. Back to Alteri sector.
About that time, Beverly Slater entered the sickbay and walked over to where John and David were talking. Before she could say anything, T-Bass approached.
I have good news for you. I am releasing Commander Self to light duty.
Overjoyed, John and Beverly said,
Wonderful. When?
Why, as of right now. You may leave. But I want to see you every day. About 1200 hours. Understand, Commander?
Understood, Doctor.
John and Beverly walked out of the sickbay, arm in arm. Both looking very happy. David said, I'll see both of you on the bridge at 0800. Smiling, they turned and replied,
Aye, sir.
and they stepped into the corridor. Doctor, in this case, what is light duty?
Captain. Light duty is 4 hours a day, with no strenuous or stressful duty. Simple administrative tasks or computer work. At least until he has been up for 2 weeks.
Desk work?
Perfect, sir.
David left the sick bay, went to his cabin, and sat down at his desk to figure out a decent schedule for his first officers. After several hours, he was awakened by the annunciator of his cabin door. David got up and went to his door. Opening it, he found his 2 first officers. Please come in. John looked rested and contented. Beverly seemed very pleased about something.
Captain, Beverly and I have come to ask you to marry us.
I would be delighted too. When did you make this decision?
We decided about a month ago. We just wanted to wait until John was up and around before we asked you.
Why didn't you ask me in sick bay? Beverly began to turn red around her collar, and the flush moved up into her hairline. On the other hand, John's blush began at his ears and spread from there. Oh. Okay. I understand. When shall we do it?
After we leave Naval Base and before we get to the Alteri sector.
Okay. Let's plan it for 1602 days from now, in the rec room.
Thank you, Captain.
Both officers smiled at David and turned to go. Beverly stopped and turned back to the captain.
Permission to speak freely, sir.
Permission granted. She stepped back to the captain, put her arms around his neck, kissed him, and said in a husky voice,
Thank you, sir.
David remarked as the 2 stepped out of his cabin, John, hold on to her, she's a keeper. Smiling, John looked back.
You said it.
David sat on his bunk and sighed, John, I sure envy you. Then, the pain rising in his chest, he sobbed, Oh, Stella, if you were only here. I miss you so much. He dreamed of the morning he went to the cryo chamber hundreds of years before. He dreamed about Stella, seeing her face and hearing her whisper, Oh, David, do that again. 0800 and David and his 2 first officers were ready to embark on their mission. The bridge crew applauded the 2 commanders and wished them the very best in their upcoming wedding. John, you have the con. Take us out. I'll be in my ready room.
Aye, sir. All hands, this is the first officer, prepare for maneuvering. Helm, back maneuvering thrusters only.
Back, maneuvering thrusters, aye sir.
The Constitution began a slow trek back away from the naval base. Over the comm came the words of Commodore Clausen.
Constitution, calm seas and fair winds.
I thank you, calm seas sir.
John replied.
Navigation, set course for the Alteri sector, UL5.
Alteri sector, aye sir. UL5.
John smiled at Beverly at the science station.
Okay, let's do it.
The mighty old cruiser began to slip into UL Drive. The sounds around the bridge took on the usual slightly muffled quality that the crew knew too well. Nevertheless, each officer and crewman bent to their task, glad to be about the routine that always came at the beginning of a new mission. At noon, David relieved John and reminded him of his appointment with Dr. T. Vass. Beverly, you may accompany John to lunch. Be back at 1300, please. You're still the first officer. Beverly got up and headed to the personnel lift.
Aye, sir.
She took John's arm, and they left the bridge. David shook his head, smiled, and checked their position. First day out and 5 to go. David's mood lightened as he thought of the work ahead. But there were times when things were going slow that a voice would whisper sweetly in his ear.
Do that again.
And he would feel Stella's soft lips on his. And the pain would rise in his heart. Would he never be able to live a day without Phyllis or Stella coming to him in his reverie? On the second day out, 1600, the crew assembled in the rec room, and David stood in the usual place, his little black book in his hand, waiting for his two officers. Commanders Self and Slater entered the room together. Both were in their dress uniforms. David reflected on the quality of these two fine, proud, royal officers, despite being so misused by the Admiralty. He directed that they face the crew, holding hands. Everyone could see their mutual love and respect as they looked into each other's eyes. David took them solemnly through the vows, and after the wedding, he toasted the newlyweds, "Heaven bless you both." 6 days out and the Constitution approached Altaris. David called to his communications officer, Abels, "Raise Commodore Mendez please."
Aye, sir.
Mendez here.
Commodore, the USS Constitution here, Captain Stevens. We have been ordered to continue our mapping mission of this sector and to report any significant finding to you.
I understand, Captain. Please keep me informed of where you are and upload your new star charts when you have a significant amount that's new. My compliments to Admiral Halloran. Carry on. Calm seas and fair winds.
Aye, aye, sir. Calm seas, Constitution out. Number 1. Let's begin. Standard mapping procedures.
Standard procedures, sir.
John smiled.
Helm, 360 Mark 180.
The ship moved away from Altaris and began to map the system. Altaris was the second planet from the Sun. The first was a minor planet of molten iron. Onward the ship moved to the third planet. Cold and airless with no moons. On out, they continued. 7 planets in all. Only one with any life. Altaris Prime. Sherry's home world. Inward toward the galactic center in another star system. A single planet was circling a red dwarf sun. No life. But they discovered a wealth of mineral resources. 10 days out from Altaris, the crew had fallen into a routine of scanning, investigation, analysis, mapping, and moving on. The Admiral spent several hours a day on the bridge or in David's ready room. The officers and crew worked much like a well-oiled machine. Good humor and light conversation characterized the disposition of the crew, even during the tedious, routine work. Occasionally the long-range sensors would momentarily indicate something in the sector that moved quickly. Finally, Jenny Olsen at the science station reported for the third time in the shift that she had detected the object again. David turned to Abels. "Send a message to Commodore Mendez that we are going to investigate this elusive object."
Aye, sir.
Yellow alert. Tapping his comm badge. "Admiral, we are going to detour from our mapping mission to investigate a phantom object at the fringe of our sensors. If you're interested."
I'll be right there, Captain.
Olsen, give the coordinates to navigation, please. Lay in a course to intercept. UL9. Do it.
Course set, intercept, UL9, aye, sir.
The powerful vessel began to turn and accelerate. Jenny called out.
There it is. Dead ahead.
As the Admiral stepped onto the bridge, David rose from his command chair and offered it to him. "I've never seen you in action, sir. Please take the con." The look on Tim's face was one of surprise and then of gratitude. He took the chair.
Status.
Olsen reported.
A ship dead ahead, sir. Running dark and moving away at UL7.
Shelley Jacobs at navigation reported, UL9, sir.
UL9.
David whispered to the Admiral, "Sir, this ship will do UL12 without straining. The integrity field is tied into the new shield generators, and we use the trilithium technology."
Helm, UL12.
UL12, aye, sir.
Tim sat forward in the command chair, absorbed in chasing down this phantom. David watched the look of utter satisfaction on the Admiral's face, glad he had given him this chance to be Captain Halloran again. The ships raced through the system. But the outcome was inevitable. The Constitution drew alongside the second ship and fired a shot across her bow. Admiral Halloran ordered.
Abels, ship to ship. This is Admiral Timothy Halloran of the System Heavy Cruiser Enter. Constitution. He too.
The alien ship came to a slow stop and hovered quietly in space.
This is Armand Sigma tag of the Compendium of Worries. By what right does you cast this ship?
Armand, don't play innocent with me. You've been dogging our steps for the last 10 days. So what are you playing at?
You have encroached upon our space. You have been sent to find out your intentions.
Armand, you could have come and asked instead of sneaking around the perimeter of our sensors.
Admiral, it is difficult to explain ourselves in this manner. May I invite you to our ship to discuss this situation face to face?
I will teleport over to your ship with the captain of the Constitution. We will be there in a few minutes.
John looked worried.
Admiral, Captain, I have to remind you this is not the System Navy protocol.
Number 1. This is a first contact situation. The Admiral and I are acting in the best interests of the system. We will wear our personal shields. Shirley will keep a fix on us and teleport us back if things get hairy. Okay?
Aye, sir.
Abels, contact Commodore Mendez and inform him of our situation. Halloran and Stevens walk to the personnel lift. John, you have the con. And they entered the lift and dropped to the teleporter room. Shirley Wilson O'Reilly waited for them to arrange their shields and step onto the teleporter platform. Energize. The two officers faded out, and Shirley noted that the sensors indicated they had arrived in the alien ship. David and Halloran became aware they had beamed onto the alien ship's bridge. Around them stood several bipeds that seemed to be covered in a coat of gray fur. Their faces were not unlike that of an earth bear. The only adornment was a different colored wide belt on which hung several different instruments. Tim spoke.
I am Admiral Halloran. Which of you is Armand Sigmatog?
The creature with a bright red belt spoke.
Admiral, I am Armand Sigma tag.
Armand, this is Captain David Stevens. He is the commander of the Constitution.
The Armand motioned to his crew, and they all seemed to relax.
Admiral, shall we retire to my office? I would like to explain our actions.
With that, the Armand turned and led the way off the bridge. David and Halloran followed, taking as much notice of the ship as they walked down a corridor and into a spacious office. The office could have been any office in any business in the system, lined with dark wood, desk, chairs, filing cabinet, and pictures on the walls. On the desk stood a picture of someone who resembled the Armand, but somewhat younger and obviously female. The Armand sat behind his desk and offered the two Federation officers a chair opposite. He barked an order, and a small metal servitor entered carrying a tray with 3 clear flutes filled with an amber liquid. Their host offered them a flute and took one himself. Tipping his glass, he watched David and Tim closely. Tim shrugged and took a sip. David swallowed and found a mildly refreshing flavor and a warm sensation down to his toes. The Armand laughed and offered a toast.
To friendship.
To friendship.
And the 3 drank deeply. Armand, David began. Now your story.
Yes. Our solar system has 10 planets. We have colonized 6. It is not possible to colonize the other 4. Several years ago, a fleet of ships swooped down upon our outermost planet, destroying everything and killing all life, making the planet totally uninhabitable. We fought them off before they could attack another world. But we lost 1,000 ships like this one. We have been standing ready since. But their ships are too powerful for a single cruiser to risk an attack. When we detected your ship in our system, it was sent to keep track of you. Our fleet is about an hour away. They are ready if we all call them.
David and Halloran looked at each other, and Halloran replied.
Armand, not 2.5 months ago, we came upon a ship that had escaped the kind of devastation you have described. It may be the same ones who attacked your worlds. I will ask our headquarters if we can share what we know about these ships.
The Armand and the 2 Federation officers discussed the attacks, the weapons used, the shape of the ships, and other matters, some diplomatic, some strategic, some personal. Then, after a time, David tapped his comm badge, Captain to Constitution.
Constitution, Lieutenant Abels, sir.
Commander Self, please. John, stand down from Yellow Alert. We are going to follow this ship to a rendezvous. They have had the raiders like Alterus. We will probably share information. The Admiral and I are on our way back. Stevens out. Halloran tapped his comm badge.
Shirley, Teleport us back, please.
With that, David and Halloran stood and teleported back to the Constitution. The ship led the Constitution several parsecs toward the galactic center to a small dark planetoid. The Armand asked the Constitution to enter a parking orbit and wait for their representatives. After several days, another ship of the same design as the Armand arrived, and the Armand called Admiral Halloran and arranged their first meeting. After the first meeting, Halloran called David.
Dave, I want you to assign 4 security crewmen, one of your first contact specialists, and a senior officer to my mission here with the compendium.
Yes, sir. Then what?
The compendium has given me information I want you to investigate. It seems they have discovered other systems that have been attacked, like the compendium and Alterus. I'll brief you when I get back.
Admiral Halloran met with the senior officers of the Constitution and gave them the information he had received from the compendium. It seems that if David were to investigate a straight line from Alterus 10 degrees north of a line directly toward the galactic center, he would find a series of devastated systems. So Halloran wanted David to quickly investigate that line as far as he could in 5 months. 5 months?
We will be negotiating here during that time. Then I believe I will be ready to report to the system and the system navy. So it will take you 5 months to go out and 5 months to return.
Oh, I understand, sir. John has assigned the people you requested. Therefore, I am assigning Lieutenant Lawrence Sorensen as your senior officer.
Captain, I asked for a senior officer, not a lieutenant.
Admiral, Larry, Lawrence Sorensen was once captain of the USS Excelsior. He is a highly decorated, experienced command officer. If you like, we can make him a brevet commander.
In that case, he will do very well. Have the promotion orders cut for my signature.
Aye aye, sir. David winked at John and Larry. Larry did not look happy.
Captain, I'm an action-oriented spaceman, not a politician. Please, can't you assign someone else?
Sorry, Larry, you drew the short straw. You're it. Tim Halloran took Larry, Sherry, the security crewman, and the first contact specialist and beamed over to the conference area of the compendium. David and the Constitution prepared for the 5-month investigation and mapping mission. David took the center chair. Set course 340 Mark 170, UL-12.
340 Mark 170, UL-12I.
Execute. The mighty vessel began to turn and accelerate. Soon the ship was moving at UL-12 in the line drawn by Admiral Halloran to begin their investigation. David planned to pinpoint a solar system, travel as fast as possible to that system, ascertain whether any of the planets had been attacked, investigate, log all pertinent data, and move on to the next system. This way, they could investigate many systems in the 5 months the Admiral had allocated them. As the ship approached the first system, sensors located 6 planets, 2 gas giants in the outer orbits, the other 4 consisted of an Earth size, a Mars size, and 2 the size of Mercury. Preliminary sensor scans of the gas giants showed no signs of life or attack. Scans of the Earth-sized body showed all the signs of an attack like the one on Alterus. The data from the planet indicated that the attack had been relatively recent, about 6 months before the attack on Alterus. All the weapons data collected matched the data collected from the devastation of Alterus. Continued scans proved the attack had eradicated all life, with no Arctic habitat. With all shifts working at capacity, the data was collected, analyzed, compared, and catalogued in 3 days. The Mars-sized planet proved to have been attacked as well. It appeared to have been colonized by another world. There was evidence of atmosphere domes and underground habitats. The data indicated that both worlds had been attacked during the same period. The destruction was equally complete on both planets. Again, to complete all the necessary work took 3 days. The 2 smaller inner planets were without signs of attack. So it was time to move on. In the 5 months of investigation, the ship and crew found, mapped, and investigated 21 systems. They found 17 systems with evidence of attack. The attack on one system seemed to come about 6 months after the previous system's attack. The enemy seemed to have no regard for any life form at all. There was evidence of silicon-based life forms being destroyed as readily as carbon-based life forms. There did not seem to be any regard for the level of civilization or complexity of the organisms. 2 planets with only an emerging life form, no more complex than an amoeba, were blasted as thoroughly as high, even spacefaring civilizations. The consensus aboard the Constitution was that whatever race was responsible for these attacks were thorough, ruthless, and desired to destroy all living things except themselves. At the end of the 5 months, David looked at where they had been and where they needed to be in 5 months and decided they had time to investigate 3 or 4 more systems. During the voyage, Captain O'Reilly continued to work on the subspace teleporter. One day after the lunch hour, O'Reilly approached David and reported limited success in the project. "We can teleport people and things through subspace. But, the problem is that we need a subspace receiver on the other end. So, let me see. What we need is a subspace transceiver on both ends. Is that right?"
"Aye, sir. That's right."
"How big would such a unit be?"
"It would be about the size of the replicator the Enterprise gave you."
"That's not too big. What about power? What kind of power would we need?"
"Something about the size of a laser rifle power unit."
"How many teleports could we make on one power cell?"
"We could teleport about 3 times on one charge."
"That's acceptable. Every member of a landing party would carry their own power unit. We could replace or recharge exhausted cells as needed. I would see that as an emergency system." "Great work, O'Reilly. Let's build 3 portable systems and modify the ship's teleporters to use the subspace system when necessary."
"Aye, sir. I've got 2 portable systems ready. We'll get on the rest right away."
O'Reilly. We need a full write-up, schematics, procedures, and all. You know the drill."
"Aye, I've got the lads and lasses working on that now."
"Great. Thank you, Captain O'Reilly." The following 3 systems mirror the previous 17 systems: complete destruction of any planet that might have supported any life form. David debated the wisdom of going on or turning back. Finally, he decided to return to the contact party and prepare to report their findings to the system Navy. It took 4 months and 29 days to reach the Compendium conference area and contact the Admiral. As Admiral Halloran teleported back to the ship with his party, he was satisfied with the first contact progress that had been made. He had a rough trade and cooperation agreement between the system and the Compendium and a commitment from the ambassadors to put the agreement before their governing body as soon as possible. In addition, they had the Admiral's commitment to present the agreement before the System Council as soon as he could. David and John greeted the party. "Welcome aboard, Admiral, ladies and gentlemen. Good to have you home." The Admiral replied,
"Good to be home. Well, we have a lot to tell each other, so let's plan to meet in the conference room tomorrow morning. I'm beat, and I suspect everyone else in our party is too."
Everyone else nodded in agreement. So, David arranged to meet at 0900 the following day. As David, John, and Halloran were leaving the teleporter room, Tim asked,
"Dave, how long would it take to get to Tal?"
"Tal? I'll find out and let you know." "Why, sir?"
"I always put flowers on my first wife's grave on the anniversary of her death. So that's coming up soon."
"What day is that, sir?"
"It will be in exactly 29 days.
"We will get there in time. I guarantee it." "Rest well, Admiral." David and John went on as Halloran and Sherry entered their cabin.
"Sir, do you know where Thal is?"
"It's near the Gorn and Centurion borders."
"We have to cross the entire Federation. That's going to take a long time."
"I figure we will push Mr. O'Reilly's engines to the limit." The Constitution shot across space at a speed never before achieved by a Navy heavy cruiser. Captain O'Reilly's engines performed magnificently. The ship sailed at an unbelievable UL-14 for 28 days. Every member of the crew, including Admiral Halloran and Captain O'Reilly, were astounded at the performance of the old ship. Admiral Timothy Halloran placed a bouquet on the teleporter pad at the precise time he had requested. His arm around Sherry, Tim quietly shed a tear and said,
"Energize."
Once again, his commitment to his beloved Judith was kept. He turned to Sherry, and they left the teleporter room arm in arm. The nearest naval base was Naval Base 17. Accordingly, Admiral Halloran directed David to go to that naval base to begin transmitting their reports.